Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Borden, Moment Magazine's Zoominar producer. I want to thank you for joining us for this very important conversation, The Danger of Israel's Northern Border, Hezbollah and the Failed State of Lebanon, with Hanin Ghaddar and Nadine Epstein. This program is being recorded and is available on our website at momentmag.com. We will continue hosting additional conversations in the coming days and weeks. And Moment's editorial team will continue updating our website with new articles. Again, you can find all of this at momentmag.com. Now for today's program. Hanin Ghaddar is the Friedmann Senior Fellow in the Washington Institute for Near East Policy's Linda and Tony Rubin program on Arab politics, where she focuses on Shia politics throughout the Levant. The longtime managing editor of Lebanon's Now News website, Hanin shed light on a broad range of cutting-edge issues, from the evolution of Hezbollah inside Lebanon's fractured political system to Iran's growing influence throughout the Middle East. She is the author of the recently released book, Hezbollah Land, and served as one of the speakers at our Moment Institute Middle East Fellows program, which launched earlier this year. Joining Hanin today is Nadine Epstein, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Moment Magazine and founder and Executive Director of the Center for Creative Change. Please welcome Hanin Ghaddar and Nadine Epstein.
Israel-Hamas War is on all of our minds, and all of us are deeply concerned at the prospect of the conflict spreading throughout the Middle East. Already, Hezbollah has been firing missiles into Israel, and one of the greatest concerns is that Israel will face a two-front war with Hezbollah on its northern border. Today, I'm speaking with Hanin Ghaddar, a former Lebanese journalist and an expert on Hezbollah and Shiite Muslims at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. We're going to take a deep dive into the inner workings of Hezbollah, including its leaders, its weapons arsenal, its domination of the Lebanese government and economy, Iran's role, and what we can expect. Good afternoon, Hanin, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's definitely my pleasure.
You know, we're talking today because there's just a lot of conversation and a lot of talk right now that there could be a full-blown second front on Israel's northern border with Lebanon and even a region-wide conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we felt it was really important to really dig into this.
Yeah.
But before we go into that, I wanted you just to tell us a little bit about yourself. In particular, you were a journalist in Beirut for many years, and you were forced to leave.
Yeah.
And I just wanted you just for a minute or two, just to so our audience could learn a little bit about you. Yes. And what happened.
Sure. Just briefly, because this is not the people's topic today, just to say that I am Lebanese. I've been here for 7 years. Before that, I was a journalist and the editor of Now Lebanon, which was an online magazine based in Beirut. I lived in the south of Lebanon. I'm from a Shia town in south of Lebanon. I lived there until I moved to Beirut for college, for the American University of Beirut, and then I worked as a journalist until I came here. So my issue is that why I can't go back, obviously, because of Hezbollah. So I covered Lebanon. I edit a lot of articles on Lebanon, but I really focused on Hezbollah mainly because it's like professionally and personally, I cannot but focus on Hezbollah because I grew up with this organization developing around me and growing around me, and professionally I thought that I have a lot to say, and it became really an expertise for me. It's like I wanted to be that kind of expert because I have this personal connection to the community and the people around it. So, but my writings were critical. Of course, I wasn't a big fan of Hezbollah, and I was very critical until like they started campaigns against me, culminated with a military court a prison sentence. And it's I say military court because it's one of the institutions that are controlled by Hezbollah, which was dropped later because of U.S. pressure on it. But at the end of the day, it's really not about the prison sentence. It's the fact that all these campaigns and the fact that they are ready to take me to prison makes me feel that it's dangerous, and they've been killing a lot of people, assassinating Shia dissidents in Lebanon since then. So I don't feel safe going there.
So I thought maybe you should just tell us a little bit about Lebanon today, because, Lebanon's been out of the news for a
Mm.
long time. And, really, and what is the relationship between the Lebanese government and Hezbollah?
It is becoming more and more a Hezbollah state. So long time ago, when Hezbollah started in the 80s to become, like branded themselves as the resistance movement, they grew from that into more of a state within the state. And because they have their own financial system, their own social services, little states that started to grow within the Lebanese state. So we used to say that Hezbollah is a state within the state. However, today I would say that Lebanon is now the small state within Hezbollah state. And Lebanon's small spaces of independence are shrinking every day, and it's not easy to maintain them. Even if you like in 2018, the Lebanese really managed, despite all the violations in the parliamentary elections, managed to strip Hezbollah from their majority. However, that wasn't really translated in change, because at the end of the day, bullets are stronger than ballots. And as long as Hezbollah has its arms pointed at the Lebanese as much as their enemies, it's going to be very difficult to make any changes. Lebanon spaces, the independent spaces are shrinking. The freedom of speech is shrinking. They're killing every space that is left. And today, with all that's going on in Gaza and all the questions about whether Hezbollah is going to open a front from Lebanon to against Israel today, despite the fact that like Hassan Nasrallah's Hezbollah's leader hasn't said a word, but the Iranians are taking charge. They are the ones who are actually speaking on behalf of the Lebanese today. The Prime Minister of Lebanon, Najib Mikhaili, said yesterday that clearly, without any doubt, that this is not the Lebanese government cannot control Hezbollah's decision. The Lebanese government cannot do anything, and the Lebanese government cannot tell Hezbollah whether to go to war or not. Basically, declaring that, officially saying that Lebanon is under Iran's occupation.
So, does the Lebanese government want to be at war with Israel?
There's no Lebanese government per se. The Lebanese government is divided. Hezbollah is in the Lebanese government. They have ministers, they have allies. So it's really, there's no Lebanese government that is separate from Hezbollah. But I would say a lot of people within the government, a lot of opposition figures in the government, in the parliament, have already made statements saying that we do not want war for Lebanon, but at the end of the day, they can't decide. The Lebanese people do not want to go to war. So many people in Lebanon are sympathetic to the Palestinians' pains today, which is, of course, obvious. Everybody's sympathetic. Very few are supportive of Hamas, because the distinction is being made between Hamas and the Palestinian. And there's a lot of sympathy for Gaza and the Palestinians. But even Hezbollah's support base, they are in a way cheering for Hamas, cheering for Hezbollah's operations. But as long as it's from a distance, they haven't asked Hezbollah to go for it, because they understand the price.
So, please, why don't you differentiate a little bit between Hezbollah and Hamas? I think, they both are names that aren't in English that start with H, and I think people often get them confused. But, what makes them different, and what are their similarities?
It's really the relationship with Iran. Hezbollah's relationship with Iran is much more organic. They were founded by Iran. They were totally funded by Iran. They're part of the IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guards. They are the Quds Force. They are the main arm of Iran's Quds Force in the region. They're very organic. They're Shia, which is ideologically also connected to Iran. They're connected to Wilayat al-Faqih in Iran. They are very much organic in their relationship. They're not a proxy. Hamas is a proxy. Hezbollah is part of the IRGC. Hamas is not. Hamas is a proxy of the IRGC for many reasons. One, because they're not Shia, they're Sunni. So they are not really ideologically connected or sectarianly connected, because the ideology is very important for Iran. They're not ideologically connected to it. Two, they have shifted. They haven't been found by the Iranian regime. They have joined later, and they have shifted gradually. So during the Syria war until from 2011 until 2017, there were 5 years of Hamas moving against Assad with the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, because at the end of the day, they are Muslim Brotherhood. They are Islamists in that sense. So they shifted, and now they came back. The whole, there was a process of bringing them back into the fold, because they realized that one, Assad is not leaving. Two, the Muslim Brotherhood in the region is weakened. And three, that they're better off supported by the Iranian than the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Iranian give them arms and money more than anyone else. So they came back to the fold, but the Iranians never forgave them for that, and the Iranians do not consider them as family the way they consider Hezbollah. And at the end of the day, they really know that, and they were hoping that they will get a lot more support from the Iranians at Hezbollah at this point, but they kind of realized that they are left alone in this battle. So a few of their leaders have already expressed disappointment with the Iranians and Hezbollah leaving them alone in the battle.
But yet Iran was involved in helping Hamas with some of the information for planning the attack against Israel. I mean,
yes, definitely. So what they did is that the Iranians and Hezbollah and Hamas and the Qassam brigades in Lebanon and the other Palestinian factions under the Iranian orbit, they set up something called the Joint Operation Room in Beirut in April 2023. And the last time such an operation room was set up was in 2006 war in Lebanon. So this was an indication of a coordination. And after that, this coordination, the result of this joint operation room, immediately afterwards, there were escalation along the borders by both Palestinian factions and Hezbollah, which we saw since April until today. And the whole thing was culminated with the October 7 attack by Hamas. So pretty, there's no evidence, of course, but there are a lot of circumstantial evidence, if you want, to indicate that there is a coordination. So Hamas did this, and the price is really Palestinian blood, the destruction of Gaza, something that the Iranians and Hezbollah can deal with. They can reap a lot of rewards and gains from this war without having to pay any price. So this is their calculation today. They don't need to escalate further. What they need to do is really play a very calculated game again along the border, showing that they are part of the war without really having to pay huge prices for the war. This, of course, can change any minute, because miscalculations, shift in strategies, maybe Iran realizes that these gains are not going to be translated politically, so eventually this might become the war, but not yet.
I mean, and reminding that the Palestinians are Sunnis.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of calculation going on here, but and although there's a lot of support and the Palestinian cause is very central to Hamas and also to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, there's also kind of antipathy there as well.
Yes, exactly. It's the fact that since the beginning, the Iranians, since starting Hezbollah in Lebanon, the whole narrative of the Iranians has been to free Palestine, free Jerusalem, definitely making sure that the lobbying strategy in the Arab countries has been about Palestine, but there's always the saying in Lebanon that the people that these guys support the Palestinian cause, but do not like the Palestinian people, which translates today meaning that they are taking advantage of the Palestinian sympathy. They are using and abusing and pretending to support the Palestinian cause. They are really like using it, but they don't care about the Palestinian life. Because what happened is that anyone and everyone would immediately imagine an Israeli reaction of that sort. So they have to be held responsible for that. They never really cared about the Palestinian. No, they don't. It's sometimes it's a sectarian thing, Sunni versus Shia, but most of the time, because their wars in Lebanon really cost Lebanon and the Lebanese a lot, including Shia Lebanese, mostly Shia Lebanese, and they didn't care. It's sometimes sectarian, but most of the time it's really ethnic. It's Persian versus Arab.
Ah, okay, that's so interesting. So. And in Lebanon itself, there's obviously a large Palestinian community. Is that Palestinian community deeply connected with Hezbollah?
No, the community isn't. The Palestinian factions in Lebanon are divided. There's always Fatah controlled areas in the camps, and there's also Hamas. And recently, there's been a lot of effort in Lebanon by Hezbollah and Hamas and the Palestinian factions to take over the Palestinian decision in Lebanon, because they want to weaken Hamas. So recently, just before this, in the last few months, there was an ongoing battle in the Palestinian camp in Ain Hilwa in Saida in the south, because Fatah was the dominant actor there, and Hamas started a war with Fatah, and really a long war that didn't really stop. Like what distracted everyone from it is what's happening today. But there's a serious, continuous effort in Lebanon's Palestinian camp by Hamas, supported by Hezbollah, to take over the Palestinian decision within the Palestinian community. But again, the Palestinian people are never part of these decisions.
Oh, that's so interesting, really. Okay. And what is what is the average Lebanese person who may not be a Hezbollah supporter? I mean, what are they thinking right now?
They do not want war, obviously. They understand that Lebanon is today not in a good situation because of the financial crisis, political crisis that has been shattering Lebanon since 2019, actually. Lebanon is already in very bad situation, financially, economically, politically, security-wise. There are like clashes in the street, crime rates. No one can afford a war right now. And no one in Lebanon wants this. No one, even Hezbollah supporters do not want it. They understand the price for it. So, and Hezbollah understands that this is something that they have to take into consideration. In 2006, when Hezbollah entered the war, they had guarantees from Iran that they are going to get compensations, that they will be able to restock their weapons, and that the Gulf will rush with money to help Lebanon reconstruct. And Lebanon was doing okay in 2006. Today, things are very different. They don't have any guarantees of any kind, nothing. They only have their weapons. And the weapons, especially the precision missiles that they have developed in the past few years, they have hundreds of them. And they don't really feel that they are obliged to join the battle today, because the gains that they receive, which is regional for Iran or domestic for Lebanon, are there. Like they can use them now. They can translate them into political victories and political gains. Entering the war, meaning that they will have to launch their weapons, but they will lose their weapons. Today, the threat of their weapons is more important than the weapons themselves, is stronger than the weapons themselves. Once they lose them, use them and lose them. So Iran can make them like new weapons, new missiles, but not the precision missiles. This is really the strong card that Iran and Hezbollah has today, the precision missiles that can really hurt Israel. And once they're out, everything is on the table.
So there's no guarantee, as you're saying, that Iran's going to replace these weapons, and Iran's busy feeding weapons to Russia and all over the world, and has other customers.
They will eventually. So they have facilities all over the place, like producing weapons. But I'm saying that producing the precision missile weapons, is going to take a very long time. These are not easily made.
Okay.
This is, and to also reach the 1,300 missiles of all kinds also is going to take a lot. They will start restocking Hezbollah's arsenal, but it's going to take a lot of time to bring back that kind of military strength. And also they are going to take years in order to replace the missiles, precision missiles that they already have produced. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and money and resources to produce these missiles. And military experts would have like more details on that, but I know that they've been working on them for many years, and they have been derailed by the Israeli strikes in Syria, and they already have some, but not enough. So it will take a long time. They'd rather keep them and use them as a deterrence measure and a threatening tool, rather than use them and be left with nothing.
So you don't really think that there's going to be a huge missile barrage into Israel at this point? And
not yet,
not yet.
You know, like they are trying to leverage the gains that they have today, which is Iran was feeling that they're isolated from the whole, new Middle East normalization, economic prospects for the Gulf and Israel and Europe and Asia, this like train that is going through all these countries with the economic prospects to it, telling Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, the countries that you control, are no longer bargaining chips that you can pressure us with. You know what? Take them. We are no longer interested. The new Middle East is going somewhere else. You have the old Middle East, we have the new Middle East. So they realize that they do not have bargaining chips anymore. And they realize that they need to, show that they do. So this is how they do it. So they feel that they have gained this edge and a leverage that they have now, that you think we don't have bargaining chips, but we do. You think that we don't have a pressure tool, but we do. However, they don't want to use them all. They use Hamas, but they want to keep Hezbollah for the next steps. Saying that, so far, every indication with their statements and their calculated attacks along the border, with everything they've been saying and doing, shows that so far this is their strategy. However, this is a very sensitive, risky situation where anything might change, any small escalation, because every day they're pushing the limits. And at one point, there might be a preemptive attack by Israel. At one point, the Iranians will just say, you know what, go for it, because no one is listening to us. No one is considering our gains as valid. Everything might change tomorrow. I'm analyzing what happened so far. I cannot predict tomorrow.
Nobody can.
Nobody can.
Nobody can.
Yeah.
So what can be done to basically stem the expansion of Hezbollah in Lebanon and along the border? Is there what's the strategy for that?
Listen, I don't think after what happened, it's we can go back to the old strategies of deterrence and security versus change, and everything changed. Everything changed. We saw what they can do, and we saw that they are capable of doing that, and they are not deterred. So even if Hezbollah doesn't go for a full-scale war tomorrow, or during this war even, there's still a danger, and they will go for it. They are actually escalating, and they might even escalate more tomorrow. They might not use all their weapons, but they might do something else. They might do another kind of infiltration. Who knows? So the danger is there. And I really think the whole strategy towards Hezbollah has to change, but this stems in Iran. This is an Iranian decision. These are Iranians, proxies and partners and members. This is Iran's arms in the region. And the solution really is not in Lebanon. It's not fighting the arms. The solution is going back to Iran and dealing with the origin of the threat there. And the strategy towards Hezbollah, Iran, all their regional situation in the region and status and power has to be revisited. This is not going to be, on the short term, it is so far focused in Gaza, but on the long term, I don't think this is going to be resolved if really we're looking for a long-term resolution, long-term stability, not just for Israel, America's interest in the region, America's allies, etc. If we're really looking for a long-term resolution for this, there's no escape from looking at Iran and dealing with the Iranian threat inside Iran.
And this, I'm just curious, I guess this is Iran's response to, as you pointed out, to possible peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, to the Abraham Accords, to the changing Middle East. And this is their only response,
they
really.
realized actually that all these deals with Israel and America and from both administration, everything is moving in a direction where there's a new Middle East moving forward with different kind of economic and political strategy, while the Middle East that they control is now old, invalid Middle East.
So what fallout do you envision from the planned Israeli invasion of Gaza?
So this might change things, right? Hezbollah itself didn't really say it directly. They've never actually uttered the word, if you conduct a land incursion, we are going to join the war. They apparently sent it via Egypt. That was a message sent by Iran via Egypt. They can play. There are different scenarios here. One, they can play the plausible deniability, like we really didn't say that, we meant something else. Two, they can see it as an opportunity to go for it. Maybe that's the red line. They never stated this as a red line, but it could be a red line. But they have also to consider everything else if they do this. So they are really considering. Three is, it could be, depending on how the land incursion go, because they can, if Israel suffers a lot of casualties during this invasion, they can spin it into a victory and don't have to do it. So it depends how they see it. And at the end of the day, I don't think they have made a decision yet, because the fact that their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, hasn't said a word yet, it means that they haven't really made this decision. I think he will, once we know that he's going to speak, then we will have to pay a lot of attention, because he's not going to come out and say anything that has already been said. This is a very decisive moment for him. Once he is scheduled to speak, then we have to pay attention. This could be a changing moment.
So he's the all-powerful kind of commander of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
He's the spokesperson of Hezbollah in Lebanon. He is the political leader in Lebanon. They're all military people, but they don't actually have, that's another challenge that they have. They don't have a military commander the way they did with Imad Mughni or Badruddin. Mustafa Badruddin was killed by the Iranians probably, but that was when Qasem Soleimani became so let me get you the succession story here very quickly. Imad Mughni was the first military leader, and he was excellent. The Iranians trusted him 100%. He even participated in the decision-making on very high level.
And what years was that? What years was that?
Until he was killed in 2008 in Damascus by a joint US-Israeli operation. And then afterwards, Mustafa Badruddin replaced him. Mustafa Badruddin did not fill these shoes, at least when it comes to the Iranians. And he was okay but there weren't really any big battle to test him until Syria happened and the Iranians sent Hezbollah to Syria. But then Qasem Soleimani came and decided that he wants to be the hand-on commander. And when Mustafa Badruddin challenged him, he killed him. That's what we know. So
the Iranians killed him.
Yes, Qasem Soleimani himself killed him because he challenged him. That's what Hezbollah sources tell me. So I don't know. There are no real evidence again, but again, there's substantial evidence, sources. lots of reports about it. So there's a big probability that yes, he was killed by Qasem Soleimani himself. But then that's the problem, because Qasem Soleimani decided that he's going to be Hezbollah's leader. And he did not replace Badruddin with anyone. So we have Imad Maghni, Mustafa Badruddin, and then Qasem Soleimani. He was the hands-on leader. When Qasem Soleimani was killed, his replacement didn't know anything about Hezbollah. Not the way he did, not the way any other person did. So they didn't really, they still don't have a military commander of that magnitude. They have some people on the ground that are good enough, but they're not Ahmad Maghni and they're not Qasem Soleimani. So they do have a leadership issue. Hassan Nasrallah, even throughout all these succession process, he was there, but he was never really on the ground. He's not a military commander. He's not the guy who leads the battle. He's the guy who speaks, who's the guy who coordinates on political issues. He's the guy who understands the situation very well, who knows how to deal with the domestic, regional, political dynamics, but he's not a military commander per se. So they do have this issue today.
So as you describe all this, it just sounds like, again, Lebanon's just not a functioning state. It's like the rule of assassination, really. It's
not a functioning state, definitely not.
Going from assassination to assassination to assassination, and it's not always Hezbollah leaders being assassinated. It's all sorts of leaders being assassinated.
Hezbollah has assassinated a lot more people than his people were assassinated. Hezbollah has been a partner and a machine of assassinations in Lebanon since the beginning, actually, since they started. They started by killing all the leaders and thinkers of the leftist resistance, the Lebanese national resistance that was there before them to liberate Lebanon, not to liberate Jerusalem, to liberate Lebanon from the Israeli occupation, which was valid for many Lebanese, because once your land is occupied, of course you have to resist. So this was valid, but when they came and decided that they're going to be the resistance and not only free Lebanon, they want to free Jerusalem, they killed the Lebanese resistance leaders, and then they moved into others. And then, of course, there was another wave of assassinations in 2005 after Hariri's assassination, which we know that they're behind it. And then afterwards, this is like never stopped since then.
What's happening in Lebanon is amazing, and it's just a completely untold story, really. I mean, do you feel like Lebanon itself has the possibility of exploding?
How exploding? It's already exploded in terms of socioeconomic situation. It's exploded. There's nothing left, like there's no money in the central bank. There's no state. There are no services. Like the government doesn't give anything anymore. So the state has actually collapsed. Without the U.S. assistance to the Lebanese army, there will be no army. So there's no state. Economically, it's collapsed. Financially, it's collapsed. What's keeping Lebanon going today is not the state. It's the diaspora money that is coming on, the remittances. $6 billion coming in every day, more than the central bank in Lebanon can provide. So this is huge. Security-wise, there has been some small explosions in different areas between, Hezbollah and other communities. The only explosion that can happen is like the scenario of Hezbollah going into a war, and that's again,
and dragging the rest of the country with it,
and destroying Lebanon with it. Destroying Lebanon. If Hezbollah decides to start the war, and I mean like entering the war, doesn't mean that they are going to, like what they're doing today is not entering the war. Entering the war means that there will be thousands of Hezbollah rockets fired at Israel every day. 1,000 rockets a day, probably. So that's when we say that Hezbollah's entering the war means with precision missiles, with infiltrations, with drones, with a lot of things. So far, this is doable. That's why Israel is not really responding heavily in Lebanon. But once they decide to enter the war, we will know it.
because then Israel will be responding to Hamas and be trying to destroy Hamas on a more extreme level.
No, we will know it. I think, yes, definitely what you said is true, but we will know it because we will know that thousands of missiles are launched from Lebanon, not a few. We will know that Israel's response will be also much more aggressive. Yeah.
So I wanted to bring us back to you growing up in southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
And so what was it like to grow up in a community? And I don't remember what town are you from originally?
Al-Ghazir.
And what was it like to grow up with Hezbollah?
I didn't grow up. I was born in 74. Hezbollah started in 82, right? So back then it was more like the civil war, dealing with the civil war, and there was no real Hezbollah threat back then. 82, when they decided to launch themselves, it was clear that they're an Islamic movement first. Everybody realized that they are there, to do resistance, but the concern was more like they're very, very Islamist, like they were much more aggressive when it comes to freedoms back then. They realized later that they can't do this if they want public support. They need to focus on the resistance rather than the Islamic State. So they become less aggressive religiously throughout the years, but back then they were very religious. They would like really try to force everyone to put on the veil, women to put on the veil, to practice religion. It was very aggressive. It wasn't easy to be who you are. Then it became more political. You can do whatever you want. At one point, you feel, okay, you don't want to wear the veil, that's fine with us. You don't want to be religious, that's fine with us. And you can say whatever you want. You can dance on the tables, naked if you want in Beirut. We don't care, but not in the South, obviously. But you can do whatever you want as long as you are not critical of the resistance. That was the red line. And the moment you become critical of the resistance, then there's a problem. So it's interesting that they shifted through the years in their rhetoric, but they are pragmatic. And of course, they'd rather have an Islamic State in Lebanon, but they're pragmatic and they realize that it's not easy to do that. And I actually go through all these shifts and crossroads in the book that I published recently. There are a lot of crossroads here, a lot of phases of Hezbollah, if you want. And I definitely did live throughout these phases. But in summary, they started as a very popular movement. It was very difficult to say, to be critical of them because people didn't understand why you're critical, the resistance, what's wrong with you, they're liberating the land. And then there are a number of phases before 2000, and then 2000 was their peak, when the liberation and the celebrations, Israelis are out, Hezbollah is great. That was the peak. And then it was downhill from there in terms of popular support. In 2006, people didn't really take that well because the destruction and the fact that they started it and Hezbollah's leader saying, I did not know that this was going to happen. No one took him seriously, but they still celebrated the divine victory. But then again, Syria happened and people started asking questions. Before that, May 7, 2008, it was the first time Hezbollah pointed their guns against the Lebanese people that raised eyebrows. And then the big shift in terms, not just the Lebanese, the Shia community as well, is the 2019 protests, where they decided that they are going to protect the corrupt political leadership, political elite against the protesters and against justice, and protect corruption against, genuine change demanded by the street. Culminated with the Beirut port explosion and how they threatened everyone who is trying to find the truth in the Beirut port explosion, including the judge himself who's investigating it. So this led to total widespread criticism and dislike and anger against Hezbollah. image as a resistance group shattered completely as they became more of a drug cartel militia gang that protects corruption. And now one of the gains that they're trying to exhaust and really take advantage of is revitalizing, re-energizing the resistance narrative, whereby, you know, like, see, we're still supporting the resistance. But it's a dilemma for them, because if they go into war, the resistance narrative will become so much vibrant. At least, you know, they can play it that way, but they will lose their you know, the advantage that they have. If they don't go to war, will maintain their advantage, but they will still lose the resistance narrative. They will not be able to take advantage of the resistance narrative.
So Hezbollah is really mostly unwelcome in Lebanon, but not going anywhere.
Oh yeah. People don't like him at all. And the Shia community, there's like a silent majority, right? People who are loud within the Shia community, like Hezbollah's supporters and you know, bots on social media, and they're loud because they can, because no one's going to come after them. But if you're a Shia and you say something critical, they will come after you, and they will kill you if we become too much of a danger for them. So the people are very afraid. They're assassinating dissidents. So there's a real fear among the Shia population that it's not the same within this community. There's a silent majority, but they're silent because if they start speaking out, it becomes very dangerous for them. It's like North Korea in the south for the Shia. But those who are speaking on behalf of the Shia, the loud ones, are only allowed to speak because they're supportive. So it's a dilemma, but no one really, like, very, very few people still support Hezbollah, and even they don't have an excuse.
Which brings us back to journalists.
Yeah.
I think you already mentioned that there's really no free press today left in Lebanon. Lebanon was, for our audience, Lebanon was like an amazing country, which had journalists, and it was actually where many journalists were based, and it had a civil society, and it has a very diverse population, different Sunni, Shiites, Christians, but you know, it was an example of a country that actually worked together for many decades. And so now you have, where do people get their news? How do people learn about what's going on?
There are journalists, obviously, and still.
Wait, say that again? Where?
There are journalists. Their media is still there. It's like shrinking, but there are still certain spaces. And compared to many places in the Arab world, we're still better, right? It's still better. Compared to the past, it's not good. But compared to the rest of the Arab world, we're great. But that being said, free spaces are allowed to discuss corruption. They're allowed to discuss anyone else but Hezbollah. That's basically it. So you are free to talk about your, you know, the opponents. You are free even to talk about Hezbollah's allies. That's fine. You're free to criticize anyone you want. But when it comes to Hezbollah and Iranian's occupation of Lebanon, this is where you are meeting a red line. Especially, I'm not saying that people don't go on TV and criticize Hezbollah. Many do, and that's fine by them. But what I mean, it becomes very dangerous for you when you start hurting them with evidence, with real information, with popular opinions. When you become a danger, they go after you. So there are a lot of people on TV criticizing Hezbollah left and right, and journalists doing, you know, stories on Hezbollah, but investigative journalism about Hezbollah's operations, about Hezbollah's stances, about Iranians' presence in Syria, that's a big no. Forget it. Once someone like Luqman Aslim, for example, my friend Luqman Aslim, the Shia dissident activist who Hezbollah assassinated in 2021, he was actually, the moment he became a danger, they started threatening him. And then when he started showing evidence of them being responsible for the Beirut port explosion and going on TV talking about it, and before really like building up the rhetoric within the Shia community about it, he became a danger, so they killed him.
Wow. I'm so sorry. So you lost your friend and
Yes, not like many of them.
many of your friends. Is there some question that I didn't ask you that you think is important or something that I've left out?
Well, we can go on and go into the details forever, but I think we covered most of the important things. One thing actually I would like to add is that while the Lebanese front is boiling, we should not ignore what's happening on the Syria-Israel front, the Golan. There have been a lot of activity there, some clashes, but a lot of activity by the Iranians bringing in hundreds and hundreds of Syrian proxies along the border. So we're thinking here, the Lebanon front, everybody's thinking about the Lebanon front, but I think we shouldn't ignore a scenario where there will be like a multi-front against Israel.
So this is not actually Hezbollah in Syria. These are
Iran and Hezbollah-led militias.
okay.
Mm.
So you feel
Iran
like
and
that's
Hezbollah.
because Syria has even more of a vacuum than Lebanon. So you feel like this is a more this is actually even more concerning at this point.
They might actually use the Golan front to spare their advantage in Lebanon. Who knows? This is the scenario. One of the scenarios is that to spare their advantage in Lebanon, but at the same time, not losing the resistance narrative. That could be one of the things they could do. It's a scenario.
And so these Iranian proxies that are in Syria have the same access to precision missiles?
Yeah, of course. Everybody has they're mostly based in Lebanon because the facilities in Syria have been targeted by Israeli attacks multiple times. And Israel just recently, this week, they bombed Iranian targets actually in both the Aleppo and Damascus airports. So it's heating on this level.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. It was really fascinating, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Me too, definitely. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hanin, and thank you, Nadine, for taking the time to join our Moment audience. As a reminder, you can find information about upcoming conversations and new articles on our website at momentmag.com. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us.